Okay, hey everybody. So it is a Sunday for me, and let's do a post. I've been itching to get to a Walden post for a while, so here we go. Let's get started. Okay, so I've been reading a bit of Walden. Hopefully you have too, and in preparation for today, um, basically we're going to really go through this page by page, if you will. I'm not going to read every line, of course, but I'm going to skip paragraphs. Like this is where we ended on our last post, and so we're going to actually just skip this paragraph. Although I think it's a great paragraph, and I'm going to just kind of go through and highlight some stuff. And I've been reading my actual book, which I have right next to me, and yeah, I hope you do too. And this is also a great place to do it if you want to read here. So, I'm going to get into some neat stuff today. Hang on one second. Okay, this paragraph is a very important paragraph to set the stage for basically all of Walden. So I want to read it, at least most of it. I see young men, my townsmen, whose misfortune it is to have inherited farms, houses, barns, cattle, and farming tools. For these are more easily acquired than got rid of. Okay, so there we go. This is once again Thoreau turning things on a dime. It's a misfortune to inherit these things. I mean, these days, everyone's looking at inheritance and, estate taxes and all kinds of stuff, and we all want to inherit something. Thoreau is saying this is a misfortune. Better if they had been born in the open pasture and suckled by a wolf, that they might have seen with clearer eyes what field they were called to labor in. Okay, this is really important. This is what Walden is about. With clearer eyes. So there's something about being born in the open pasture, and what does that really mean? Without inheritance, without any kind of burdens that are already almost like imposed upon you. Well, you're the son of a doctor. Oh, well, you're the son of a farmer. You need to go into farming. I think of Van Gogh. He was, I think his father wanted him to be a lawyer or a doctor or something, like all those people did back then. And he didn't. He went off and became an artist and went through tons of terrible times, mind you. And I don't necessarily condone. I think Van Gogh had a very troubled consciousness, but he was a great artist. And that's not really probably the best example. But regardless, being born in the open pasture, where you're not burdened by, expectations on you as the son of this or the daughter of that, and you need to be doing something. And better to be free in the open pasture, suckled by a wolf, almost like a neutral party. She doesn't, she's gonna suckle you, and then you can, and then you can just go off. She's gonna eventually send you off. It's like, no, you go off on your own. It's like the natural kingdom. They don't usually keep their children around and, whatever. They just teach them what they need to know, and then they're on their way to do whatever they're going to do wherever they're going to do it. They might see, and this is really the thing, see with clearer eyes what field they were called to labor in. And of course, there's a pun there on field and labor. Field being like maybe it's an engineering field or a medical field, or just a field like of farms. You got to remember, this is an agricultural society at this time. In America in the 1840s and 50s. This is agricultural land. It's all what they do. So a lot of farming. But really clearer eyes. And this is what Walden is all about, being able to see clearly, getting rid of the dross of society, the expectations around you, just throwing them all out so that you can see clearer and live a more deliberate life, a more centered life for yourself. And then you can then really find where you want to go. Pretty neat stuff. Who made them serfs to the soil? Why should they eat their 60 acres when man is condemned to eat only his peck of dirt? And I think here of man is condemned, I think of like the curse on Adam and the curse on Eve in the Bible as a reference there. And also they're kind of a reference with dirt, how Eve was created out of dirt with Adam and things like that. I think there's biblical tonnage there. Um, Kind of like the weight of man that we have as living on earth. And also it is good to note that, the curse that Adam was given was that he had to labor for his survival. Like that was the curse that was given to him. Okay, why should they begin digging their graves as soon as they are born? They have got to live a man's life, pushing all these things before them and get on as well as they can. How many a poor immortal soul have I met, well nigh crushed and smothered under its load, creeping down the road of life, pushing before it a barn 75 feet by 40, its Augean stables never cleansed, and 100 acres of land, tillage, mowing, pasture, and woodlot. The portionless, who struggle with no such unnecessary inherited encumbrances, find it labor enough to subdue and cultivate a few cubic feet of flesh. Now, isn't that interesting? This is what Walden is all about. It's a scientific experiment about the true nature of what it means to live as a human on Earth. So what do we need? What do we get down to? The bare necessities. This is the chapter economy, remember. We get down to the bare necessities, and what are we left with? The portionless who struggle. There is a struggle with no such unnecessary inherited encumbrances. Find it labor enough to subdue and cultivate a few cubic feet of flesh. Now, this is, again, very biblical and very Victorian. We're subduing the flesh, so we're going to subdue the natures, the angers, the sex, any kind of, extreme kind of behavior. We want to live a moderate, congenial life that works in society. So we want to subdue the flesh a bit and also cultivate it, like a farm. So he's using a metaphor here as a farmer of land, as a farmer of your own human consciousness, cultivating a few cubic feet of flesh. So we want to raise the vibration, raise the tone, raise the level of culture in ourselves. And how do we do that? One thing is by reading, and another thing is by writing, another thing is by, democratic discourse. All these things are valuable to the soul and to the flesh. And that's really what Walden is all about. Another thing is getting out on your own and finding out with clearer eyes what field you're called to labor in. These are all ways to cultivate the flesh. So this is really the tone. This really sets this tone. This is the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the fourth paragraph in Walden. You see how important this is? This is what Walden is all about. This is it right here. If you get this paragraph, you basically get half of Walden. Or at least a quarter of Walden. Let's go on. But men labor under a mistake. The better part of the man is soon plowed into the soil for compost. By a seeming fate commonly called necessity, they are employed, as it says in an old book, laying up treasures which moth and rust will corrupt and thieves break through and steal. It is a fool's life, and as they will find when they get to the end of it, if not before, it is said that Deucalion and Pyrrha created men by throwing stones over their heads behind them. Inde genus durum sumus, exporensque laborum et documenta damus qua saimus originae nati. Or, as Raleigh rhymes it in his sonorous way, from thence our kind hard-hearted is. Okay, let me read that again. From thence our kind hard-hearted is, enduring pain and care, approving that our bodies of a stony nature are. So much for a blind obedience to a blundering oracle, throwing the stones over their heads behind them and not seeing where they fell. All right, now what are we talking about here, right? This is Thoreau at his best. Okay, so let's just before we get into all this stuff, let's just get this part here. Men labor under a mistake. Okay, so they're working under false pretenses. They're doing things for the wrong reasons. The better part of the man is soon plowed into the soil for compost. Now, what does this mean? So, think about this. Let's go back. He's continuing with his metaphor here of as a farmer. So, when a farmer takes on the inheritance, takes on the burden, the work that he's got to do each morning, and he plows into the ground, he's soon plowing himself into the soil for compost. Now, what does that mean, compost? It's rotted fruit, it's rotted, no longer necessary foods and, extras that are thrown in and used as fertilizer or shit. And it helps things to grow. But that's what man becomes, usually through labor. I mean, and just look at it. Can't you see that is somewhat accurate? I mean, every day you go to the job and you and you really don't, and you know the whole story. This is what he's talking about. By a seeming fate, commonly called necessity, and so now he's being practical. So he's admitting, by a seeming fate. A seeming fate. Does that mean it's a fate? Not necessarily. It's a seeming fate. Commonly called necessity. Well, I have to go to my job. I have to do these things because I need the money. I need to live. I need this. I need that. They are employed, as it says in an old book, also known as the Bible, laying up treasures which moth and rust will corrupt and thieves break through and steal. And that's a famous line of the Bible. Laying your treasures up where moth and rust will corrupt them, versus laying them up in heaven where the earthly world can't get to them. And so Thoreau is saying that they're all laboring under this. They're all living and doing this. When you go to your job, say, I need the money, are you laying up treasure where moth and rust will decay? What are you sacrificing? What are you giving up? That is what you're giving up when you just decide to deflate yourself, just suck it up and go to work, do whatever you feel like you've got to do, even though you don't want to do it. What are you giving up there, and what are you getting? What's the exchange, and are you benefiting from that? Are you laying up treasures where moth and rust will just soon corrupt and decay them? And what are you giving up? Are you giving up this clearer eyes? Are you giving up something that's just much more valuable? And he hasn't really gotten into what that is yet, but he will. It is a fool's life, as they will find when they get to the end of it, if not before. This is like the midlife crisis, right? I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm going to go buy a Porsche, and I'm going to go find some young blonde, and I'm going to go travel the world. These are people that aren't dealing with the real issue, which Thoreau is talking about, of themselves, and they're finding out at the end of it or before that they've lived a fool's life. I mean, this is an American dilemma, is it not? A Western dilemma. It is set, and the real question is it a third world country dilemma? Do we see this kind of issue happening in third world countries around the world? And I don't know. Looks like China's starting to become something like what we are, in a strange sense, as a first world nation or something like that. Some weird thing that China is. And I think that some of their people are starting to feel these kinds of issues, and there's always that sense in us to go back to a more simple, rural, kind of just easygoing, flowing with nature, and that kind of a state, right? It's all in us somewhere. Buy land, get out in the country. What is that? Thoreau is getting at what that is. Okay, so now if we want to, let's get into this. This is kind of complicated. Basically, there's a Greek myth of these two people, Deucalion and Pyrrha. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That they were like the last people on Earth, and some oracle said, pick up stones and throw them behind your head, and they'll turn into humans. And that's kind of like a story, a Greek myth. You can look it up, online. And this is a quote from Ovid, his oh gosh, what's that? I've read it. I forget what it's called.